I'm Samantha Cole, 31 years old, and 3 years ago, I received a gift I never expected would mark the beginning of an entirely different life. When my grandmother, Hazel, passed away, I thought things would unfold like in any American family: a somber funeral, some light tension over inheritance, and everyone returning to their routines. But that wasn't the case. At the attorney's office in Nashville that day, in a room thick with tension and the ticking of a wall clock, the lawyer looked up from the will, adjusted his glasses, and said clearly, "The entire 3.5-acre property in Wilson County, along with a maintenance fund of $48,000, is left to Samantha. Not split, no conditions, just me." I could feel the room shift instantly. My mother, Angela, turned and stared at me like I'd just stolen something precious from her. My father, Martin said nothing, but clenched his hands so tightly the knuckles went white. And my sister, Meredith, let out a cold laugh. Oh, she must have been confused. I didn't respond. Truthfully, I was stunned too. I never imagined Hazel would choose me. She had a small farm that looked like it came out of a painting, where I spent every childhood summer planting seeds with her, watering under the warm southern sun, and listening to stories about bountiful harvests and dry seasons when the earth cracked open. Meredith, on the other hand, would swing by just long enough to snap a check-in photo and disappear in 30 minutes. After the reading of the will, Meredith came close, her voice sharp. "You're not thinking of keeping it, are you? That land's worth over 300 grand now. Splitting it would be fair." I looked her in the eye. Grandma left it to me because I know how to listen to the land, not to have someone pave it over. A few weeks later, I officially left my job at the advertising firm in Atlanta. Coworkers who once called me creative whispered that I was having a midlife crisis. I moved into Hazel's old wooden house, roof sagging in spots, a rusted wood stove, and weeds up to my knees. But when I stood on the porch and looked across the open field and the tall pines lining the edge, I felt something no city view could offer: real life. I didn't have formal agricultural training, just what Grandma taught me and a few organic farming courses I'd taken secretly on weekends while working in the city. I started by clearing the house, then moved to surveying the soil, taking notes on moisture, light, and plant varieties. I used the maintenance fund to repair the roof, redo the plumbing, and build a small greenhouse. By day, I dug, planted, recorded. By night, I studied regenerative farming, soil microbiology, natural moisture retention, and non-toxic crop rotation techniques. I didn't wear gloves. I wanted to feel the dirt, every grain, every crack. My mom called weekly with the same sarcastic tone. "When are you coming back to a real job?" I never answered directly. I just said, "Everything here is real, Mom." Meredith didn't call at all, but I knew she was watching. Folks in town mentioned seeing her cruise by the property with a well-dressed man in a luxury car, staring out across the land like she was calculating something. I didn't need to ask to know what they were thinking. But I also knew this: I had been chosen, and I wasn't about to let anyone undo that trust. This wasn't just land. It was my grandmother's life, passed down to me, a chance to live for something that truly mattered. I named the farm Willow Rise. At the back of the property stood an old willow tree Hazel planted when she was 17. It still stands, arching its branches like a quiet guardian through the changing seasons. And me? I began planting the very first seeds of my new life. The first 6 months at Willow Rise Farm were full of dust, sweat, and sleepless nights of worry. I learned to live with the sound of wind whistling through old wooden windows, with the bitter cold of winter mornings when I had to hand pump irrigation water, and with the helplessness of seeing an entire bed of lettuce destroyed by pests overnight. It took me nearly 4 weeks just to restore the dry patch of land on the eastern side where Grandma used to grow mulberries. The soil cracked like old scars. I dug through layers mixed in worm compost and mulched with straw to preserve moisture, slowly nursing the land back to life. When the first seedlings, tender purple kale, pushed through the March sun, I nearly cried. And I built my first greenhouse using what was left of the maintenance fund. I didn't hire professionals. It was just me and two kind-hearted neighbors, Carl and Lydia, a couple in their 60s who lived half a mile away. They saw me struggling with measurements and quietly brought over a tape measure and a heavy hammer. "If you're determined to raise something from this land," Carl said, his voice steady, "then we can't just stand by." Each day, I worked from 5 a.m. until dusk. My body changed. No more expensive perfume, no polished nails, just sun-darkened skin, scratched hands, and thick calluses. But I had never felt stronger. That first summer, I brought my early harvest to the farmer's market in Lebanon, just a small table with a few bundles of herbs, baby carrots, and jars of strawberry jam I made from Grandma's garden. I didn't expect to sell out. I just hoped someone would stop. The first person who did was a silver-hailed woman named Marion, the owner of a small restaurant near Old Hickory Lake. She tasted a spoonful of jam and said one sentence: "This tastes like a memory in a jar. I want 5 jars every week." I smiled so hard I forgot to take her money. Gradually, orders started coming in from my own community. A cafe down the street bought arugula for its special salad. A nearby preschool reached out to try weekly fresh produce for their kitchen. I never made a long-term business plan, but everything started to grow the way vegetables do, from the root, slowly and steadily. Every dollar I earned went back into the farm. I built a second greenhouse on the southern edge, expanded the herb section, and began testing vertical towers to save space. I learned to compost, reused rainwater through a simple filtration system I designed myself, and installed solar lights around the main house to save on electricity. I didn't need much. A good set of pots, a few sturdy clothes for wind and dirt, and an old guitar I found in Grandma's shed. Every evening, I strummed simple chords on the porch, watching fireflies flicker over the fields like fallen stars. I lived simply, but not alone. Willow Rise Farm started becoming known among the small organic farming circle in Wilson County. Some came to learn, a few wanted to collaborate on new seeds. I didn't dare call it success, but it was meaningful. My family, though, didn't see it that way. My father, Martin, called occasionally, each time a lecture wrapped in concern. "What are you doing? You walked away from an MBA to grow vegetables?" I replied with a quiet laugh. "I'm planting life, not burning through ad budgets." My mother, Angela, sent real estate listings with notes like, "Just half that land could build you a real house." Meredith? Completely silent. But I knew she was watching. A former friend texted me saying Meredith had just posted a story. Some people would rather hug dirt than open their eyes to opportunity. I didn't respond. No need. Sometimes silence says it all. I didn't know what was coming next, but when I looked across the field of golden mustard swaying under the September sun, that soft, velvety light only Tennessee autumns bring, I felt something money can't buy. The clarity of being right where I'm meant to be. Last winter, Meredith came back. No warning. No phone call. Just one December afternoon, as I was finishing up the last of the bok choy harvest in the greenhouse, I saw a glossy, pearl-colored SUV pull up at the gate. The door opened and a pair of nude high heels stepped onto the dew-covered red clay. I almost didn't recognize her. Meredith Cole, 33 years old, once the face of a creative agency in Los Angeles, featured in Urban Impact magazine, who had stood on TEDx stages talking about personal branding and the power of digital image. Now, she stood in front of me. Blonde waves neatly styled like she'd just stepped out of a spa, skin still flawless, but her eyes empty. "Long time no see," I said, still holding a bunch of greens. "Aren't you going to invite me in, or are we going to stand here in 40-degree weather?" She smiled, tilting her head. That voice was still sharp as ever. I led her into the small kitchen, where the scent of pumpkin bread still lingered from the oven. Meredith didn't eat, just sipped a bit of tea and glanced around. "Looks like you really live here," she said softly, eyes skimming over the jars of strawberry jam on the shelf, before landing on my handwritten ledger on the table. I never pretended. "Yeah." Meredith let out a dry chuckle. "As for me, I pretended to be successful until the truth swallowed my whole company. A few weeks later, I learned the real reason for that visit. Meredith had returned after her company in LA went bankrupt following a copyright lawsuit. She'd lost nearly everything and was temporarily staying with her parents in Franklin, just about a 20-minute drive from the farm. Not long after, I noticed her car showing up more often outside my gate. At first, it was all small talk. What if you built a few rustic cabins for weekend guests? I know branding folks who could help. I declined, gently but firmly. I didn't build Willow Rise to be a check-in spot. Then gradually, the partnership talk shifted into something more pointed. Do you even realize land around here is doubling in value every year? With 3.5 acres, you could split this into at least 5 prime lots. I looked at her. This time I didn't smile. Who are you talking to, Meredith? To someone sitting on land she doesn't know how to use properly, she replied, still smiling, but her gaze was turning cold. I knew she wasn't alone in this plan, and I was right. At a birthday dinner for my father, I met Jake Benson for the first time, Meredith's new boyfriend. A man in his early 40s, wearing a fur-collared brown coat, a tidy tie, and expensive cologne you could smell from a distance. He shook my hand with just enough pressure, but his eyes were all calculation. Meredith's told me a lot about this farm, he said. You're sitting on a very strategic piece of land. With the right development, you could make 10 times more than you do from traditional farming. Potential doesn't always mean growth, I replied. But it could mean a future for the whole family. My mother chimed in, topping off Jake's wine glass. I turned to my dad. He didn't meet my eyes, just folded his napkin and said hoarsely, "Don't you think of giving Meredith a share? She's your parents' child, too." I set my utensils down and tapped the rim of my glass. We're talking about Grandma Hazel's land, right? The land she left to me. Clearly, unconditionally notarized and in her will. Understanding a will is one thing, my mother said, voice low but firm. Understanding family spirit is another. I stood up, the air tightening around my throat. I didn't come here to divide land. I came to live what Grandma believed in. If someone sees this land as a commercial opportunity, then I'm sorry, they're in the wrong place. Meredith stood behind me, placing a hand on my shoulder like a stage actress hitting her cue. You should know, Jake has deep ties with the county's zoning board. You won't be able to keep things as they are forever. I turned and met her eyes. I'm not trying to keep anything. I'm trying to protect it. That night, I drove home through the cold mist, heart heavy as stone. I knew from that moment on, Meredith was no longer just a sister in trouble. She was standing with the kind of people who would sketch blueprints over my memories and put price tags on my grandmother's legacy. That Sunday morning began with a text from my mother, Angela. Brunch at the house at 11 a.m., family meal. It's been a while since we were all together. There are a few things to discuss. I didn't like the vagueness. My family isn't the kind that wants to discuss anything on a Sunday unless it's about money, inheritance, or a plan they need me to agree to. But I still went, partly out of respect, partly because I wanted to look directly at whatever was quietly lurking beneath the sweet words. My parents' house in Franklin was exactly the same. New roof tiles, neatly trimmed garden, and the stone wall by the front door still held the wooden plaque carved with "The Cole Family, established 1991. But something felt off. Jake's silver Porsche was parked right in the middle of the driveway, not tucked to the side like a guest. That placement wasn't accidental. Inside, everything was set up like an upscale reception. Crisp white tablecloths, pre-poured mimosas, and a steaming quiche at the center of the table. But what chilled me wasn't the food. It was the leather-bound portfolio lying open in the middle of the table, like it had been waiting for me. Meredith spoke before I even had time to take off my coat. I've got something amazing to share. Jake and I are partnering with West River Group on a luxury eco-development and, trust me, your location is perfect. I looked down at the rendering. Rows of villas with green roofs, faux rustic gardens, and a cobblestone road cutting right through my land. Specifically, the Eastern Garden, where I had just begun expanding the winter herb system. "What is this?" I asked, my voice hoarse with anger but steady. "Whisper Hollow Estates," Jake said, leaning in like he was pitching a business plan to investors. "An environmentally friendly residential community, blending living spaces with light agriculture. You'd keep this house and the main planting area, but the back 3 acres, those should be for the future." My mother chimed in, right on cue, like she'd rehearsed the lines. "You don't need that much land. You live alone, and most of it's just grass. Think of the family. This is how we help Meredith rebuild her life." I looked at my father, Martin, who always chose silence during tense moments. Today was no different. He said nothing, just adjusted his tie and stared into his orange juice, like the answer was floating in it. I closed the portfolio. "Let me be clear," I began, my eyes moving from face to face. "This is not a collaboration offer. This is a pre-drawn, pre-approved plan laid out in the hopes I'll obediently sign off." Jake gave a polite smile. "We believe you're a visionary, and someone who understands family." I smiled faintly. There was no warmth in it. "The problem is, I do see clearly. I see ambition. I see urgency. And I see people hiding behind the word family to justify a blatant land grab." Meredith's tone softened in a strange way. "Sis, I don't want us to be enemies. I just want to share. That land belongs to both of us, no matter what the will says." I said, "No, that land was left to me for a reason, because Grandma knew I wouldn't turn it into $1 million blueprint. I won't betray that trust for a quick profit scheme." My mother stood abruptly. "You're being selfish, Samantha. You're letting personal emotions ruin the entire family's opportunity." I looked at her, feeling something inside me stretch tight. "No, Mom. I'm protecting something sacred, something you stopped valuing a long time ago." Then I turned to Jake. "I'm not selling, not splitting, and I won't be pressured. If you and Meredith think you can strong-arm me, look elsewhere. Willow Rise is not up for negotiation." I walked out before anyone could say another word. The sky was gray that day, clouds hanging low like they might burst. But inside, I had never felt clearer. 3 days after the brunch, I got a call at 6 a.m. from Mr. Hank, the neighbor who lives just past the soybean field next to my farm. "Samantha, something's happening. I saw a truck hauling in a bulldozer onto your land before sunrise. It's your father, and he's not alone." I couldn't speak. My whole body went numb. "I called the police," he added, "but you need to come quick. I'm standing out on the road. I don't dare go in. They've already started." I grabbed my keys, sprinting out while dialing 911 out of my phone. My hands shook so badly. I couldn't fasten the seatbelt. The 18-minute drive from Lebanon Market to the farm felt like I was holding my breath the entire time. When I turned onto the dirt path leading to Willow Rise Farm, the first thing I saw was a thick red dust cloud kicked up by the steel tracks of a bulldozer tearing into the delicate topsoil of the Eastern Herb Garden, the very section I'd refused to give up at brunch. The smallest greenhouse, where I had just started planting spring tomatoes, was crushed. Its aluminum frame bent like a carcass with its bones snapped. The windbreak plastic was shredded, fluttering in the muddy air. My father, Mattia, was operating the bulldozer. Still wearing that old brown coat, his face was tense but unwavering. In the distance, Meredith leaned against Jake's car, arms crossed, no longer hiding her intentions. I turned on my phone's camera, jumped out of the car, and screamed. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? This is my land." The bulldozer drowned out my voice, but he saw me, and he didn't stop. I ran around the side of the greenhouse, trying to get closer for a better shot. Kale rows were flattened, the drip irrigation slashed in sections, water spraying wildly like blood from an open vein. I shouted again, my voice breaking. "You're committing a crime. I have the deed. I have video. I have a witness. I've already called the police." Martine kept going a few more yards, only stopping when the first patrol car sped through the gate, lights flashing. The bulldozer halted in the middle of my purple daisy field, the one I planted to attract honeybees. A tall officer stepped out, voice low and firm. "Cut the engine. Step down now." My father slowly climbed out of the cab, his face pale. He raised his hands, not out of fear, but because he knew he couldn't deny it anymore. Meanwhile, I handed my phone to a female officer, pointing toward Mr. Hank, who stood near the fence line. "I'm the legal owner," I said hoarsely. "Here's the deed, the property tax papers, and all supporting documents. He has no legal right here." Meredith stepped forward, trying to cut in. "This is a misunderstanding. This is family property. She's hoarding everything while I have nothing." The officer raised a hand. "Step back, ma'am. This is a criminal investigation, not a civil dispute." I turned back to the farm, heart sinking. My scallion rows had been mercilessly churned, the insect trap system crushed under tire tracks. Everything I'd nurtured for 2 years, with bare hands, with sleepless nights, under a flashlight and a notebook, destroyed in a single morning. Another officer approached me gently. "Would you like to file a formal complaint now?" I looked at the video, still recording Meredith on the phone, panic, yelling, "Abort the plan, she actually called the cops." I nodded. "I do, and I'm not backing down." Police collected the footage, took Hank's statement, and documented the scene. A field tech leaned over and whispered to me, "Preliminary damages are over 50,000. If we count the lost harvest, it could double." As my father was placed in the back of the cruiser, he looked back at me one last time. Not with anger, not with remorse, just emptiness. I stood frozen in the wreckage, cold wind slipping under my coat, carrying the scent of wounded soil and crushed seedlings. And right then I understood something crystal clear. This wasn't a land dispute anymore. This was war. And I was the one my family had just declared it on. 3 days after the vandalism, I received a court summons from Wilson County. My family, listed as plaintiffs, had filed a countersuit, accusing me of unduly influencing Hazel Cole during the drafting of her will, claiming she was no longer of sound mind and had been isolated from the rest of the family. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My parents hadn't visited her once during her final year. Meredith only showed up on holidays, usually with some new fling and a bottle of red wine. And me? I was there, bringing her favorite herbal teas, listening to her tell stories about every wheat season since 1973, reading letters from the local farming co-ops she stayed in touch with until her health failed. But then I understood. They didn't care about the truth. They only needed something to stall me, a legal tactic, a drawn-out mental and emotional drain. I turned to attorney Marcia Bennett, an estate and inheritance litigation expert, around 50, sharp-eyed with cropped salt and pepper hair and a small recorder always sitting on her desk. After reviewing the file, she looked up. "They don't have any evidence that Hazel lacked legal capacity?" "No. Every document in her will was legally notarized." "Then this is a decoy move. They're hoping to scare you or wear you down before the court rules on the criminal and civil damage claims from the vandalism." I didn't respond. I wasn't afraid of them, but I was tired. Tired enough to not even feel spring creeping in outside the office window. A few days later, while I was inventorying what was left of the irrigation system, a forest green pickup truck pulled up at the gate. An older man in a khaki jacket stepped out holding a small wooden box. "You must be Samantha, right?" "Yes." "And you are?" "I'm Thomas Granger, retired veterinarian, Hazel's last surviving friend." I remembered then. She had mentioned Dr. Thomas, the man who treated her hens during the bird flu season of 2002. She asked me to keep this. Told me clearly, only give it to her if she's in trouble over the land. Seems like now's the time. Inside the box was an old fabric-bound journal, frayed at the spine, and a small silver USB stick. I sat down on the porch step, my heart pounding faster than normal. The first page of the journal was written in her familiar hand, slightly shaky but steady. Final spring. If Samantha is reading this, then what I feared has happened. She wrote about how my parents repeatedly pushed to free up the land to sell to developers. She refused. She described how I'd tended to the eggplants in hard clay soil, how I stayed up all night guarding the greenhouse from a storm. She wrote, "Only Samantha understands the soul of this land." The USB held a nearly 20-minute video. She sat in her usual armchair, wearing her old wool coat, the lighting dim but her face unmistakably resolute. I, Hazel Marie Cole, am of sound mind and body. I leave all land and property associated with the farm to Samantha Cole, not out of favoritism, but because I trust that girl not to betray the life here. I burst into tears as she looked directly into the camera at the end. Don't let anyone label greed as progress. Marcia watched the entire video, then gently patted my shoulder. You have what every lawyer wishes their client had. Irrefutable testimony from the testator. This blows their entire claim to pieces. It didn't stop there. Marcia and I combed through regional zoning files. In an old folder Hazel had stored, I found photocopies of a string of emails between Meredith and Jake, printed from her old printer, annotated in her handwriting. Read, filed. The emails revealed Jake had been planning to apply for rezoning the Willow Rise property 3 months before Meredith returned to Tennessee. They even discussed pressuring her out with public and legal force if necessary. Jake's signature was there, clear as day, with his phone number. The next morning, I submitted everything to the court, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The Wilson County Court held the official hearing on a foggy, bitterly cold Monday morning. I entered the courtroom in a simple brown suit, hair tied neatly back, holding a case I'd prepared with Attorney Marcia for the past 3 weeks. Everything in that case, from the bulldozer video and Hazel's handwritten journal to her recorded will declaration and the leaked emails between Meredith and Jake, was more than evidence. It was the soul of the farm I was fighting to protect. Across the aisle, my father, Martin, sat in a gray suit, looking more polished than usual but clearly exhausted. My mother looked cold, wearing dark sunglasses like she was attending a funeral. Meredith sat between them, hands clasped tightly, while Jake, her private attorney, leaned in constantly to whisper in her ear. The hearing opened with the plaintiff's arguments. My family's lawyer, a graying man named Carl Whitmore, painted an emotional picture. That I had manipulated Hazel in her final days, that Meredith once had a close relationship with her, and that I had subtly isolated her from the rest of the family to seize control of the property. I said nothing, just took notes. The defendant had clear financial motives, he concluded, and the fact that the family received nothing in the estate is itself a sign of injustice. Marcia rose. Then let's begin by defining what exactly constitutes injustice, she said, voice calm but unwavering. Within an hour, she presented the footage I had recorded the day my father destroyed the farm. The bulldozer crushing the greenhouse, my screams, my father yelling that Meredith is the rightful heir. A local officer testified, confirming the arrest and the estimated damages. Next came Hazel's journal. Faded pages were projected on the screen with lines like, "Martin and Angela just want to sell the land. Meredith treats this place like a burden. Only Samantha understands and loves this land like her own blood." Then Marcia inserted the USB and played Hazel's will video. The room went completely still. Hazel's voice rang out, weak but firm. "I leave this land to Samantha, no one else." The plaintiffs clearly began to falter. My mother lowered her head, my father stared at the floor, slowly shaking his head. But what blew the case wide open was what came next. An internal email Meredith had accidentally sent to my business address instead of her personal one. "If we can push her off before planting season, Jake says we can file for rezoning by March, the sooner the better. The backlot could double in value." Their lawyer objected, claiming it was a private message with no legal weight. But the judge overruled, citing clear commercial intent and evidence of attempted deprivation of legal rights. I was called to the witness stand. I spoke about those early harvests, the night spent monitoring the irrigation system, the first customers from the Lebanon farmers market, and how I had once invited Meredith to join the farm's marketing only for her to decline because she didn't want to play country games. Then I looked straight at the judge. I'm not holding onto this land for money. I'm holding it because it's a living piece of my grandmother's legacy. The land was the one thing she couldn't carry with her when she passed, so she left it with me. And I have no right to betray that. The family unraveled when the judge called Meredith to testify. As soon as she sat down, she lost composure. She always got everything, Meredith burst out. Grandma always praised her, trusted her like I didn't exist. So now that I finally have a chance to take something back, why not? She plants a few rows of lettuce and thinks she can keep the whole estate. The judge banged the gavel. Are you admitting your motive was financial gain? Meredith said nothing, but the way Jake avoided eye contact said enough. 2 days later, I received the written ruling. The court declared me the sole legal owner of the entire Willow Rise property. My family was ordered to pay $67,000 in damages and cover all attorney fees. My father faced potential felony charges for agricultural property destruction pending prosecution. A restraining order was issued. No member of my family is allowed within 300 feet of the farm. When the verdict was announced, I didn't return home with joy. I returned to a shattered farm. What used to be. My heart was now just soggy soil and broken fences like old blades lodged in memory. But spring waits for no one, and the land, even when torn apart, carries an instinct that cannot be killed. Rebirth. 3 days after the trial, the first truck pulled up to the gates of Willow Rise. It was Marion, the lakeside restaurant owner who once bought my very first jars of strawberry jam, stepping out with a box of tomato seedlings and her familiar smile. I don't know how to plant, but I do know how to dig. Then came Hank, the neighbor who warned me the day of the destruction. Then Lydia and Carl, the couple who helped me build the first greenhouse. Groups of students from Middle Tennessee's agricultural school drove in with gloves, seed bags, and a kind of energy I thought I'd lost after all those courtroom battles. On an early morning in March, I stood in the field surrounded by more than 20 people digging, planting, spreading compost. I hadn't invited them. They came because they felt part of this, not because of the land itself, but what the land stood for: sincerity, connection, and justice. I used the settlement money for 3 things. First, I rebuilt the entire irrigation system using solar power. More water efficient, drought resistant, and easy to maintain so locals could learn from it. Second, I rebuilt the greenhouse with stronger materials: galvanized steel framing, dual-layer thermal plastic, and year-round growing potential. I named it Hazel House in memory of my grandmother, and as a reminder to myself, nothing is more resilient than a will planted in love. And the third thing, which still brings a lump to my throat, I established the Hazel Seedling Scholarship for first-year agriculture students facing financial hardship, but passionate about sustainable farming. The fund is small, supporting just 3 students a year, but I know it's enough to help someone, somewhere, not give up on a dream just because they can't afford their first textbook. My story spread farther than I imagined. The local newspaper ran a headline: "Young Woman Defends Farm with Silence and a Journal." Then a Nashville podcast invited me to speak. I sat before the mic, hands still smelling of soil, and talked about the fear of suing my own father, about the moment I saw the greenhouse in ruins and what helped me rise again. Not revenge, but the memory of my grandmother planting each tomato seed while muttering, "Just believe, the rain will come in time." Willow Rise Farm wasn't just rebuilt, it became a gathering place for people who shared the same values. Every weekend, I opened the gates to the community, no fees, no fences, just a small wooden sign that read, "All who love the land are welcome." Kids ran through rows of sunflowers. Students took notes on how I used vinegar and baking soda instead of chemical treatments. A young couple asked if they could hold their wedding beside the old willow my grandmother once planted. I used to think I had lost everything when that bulldozer hit, but it turns out I only lost the illusion that family always protects you. What I gained was something far more precious, a family built on trust and choice. Meredith? I haven't seen her since, but through a mutual contact, I heard Jake resigned from the real estate firm after the media scandal. Meredith moved to Florida and opened a small flower shop. Maybe she's starting over, in her own way. My father received a suspended sentence and was ordered to complete 6 months of community service. He hasn't called. My mother sent a handwritten letter, not an apology, but an admission. You did what I never dared to do. Keep what's yours, even when the world calls it selfish. I folded the letter and placed it next to Hazel's journal. I didn't reply, because I've learned that some answers live in the life we choose to live, not in the words we write back. One late summer morning, while I was harvesting the new onion patch, a first-year student came to find me. I'm this year's Hazel Scholarship recipient, she said. I never thought I'd get the chance to go to college. I looked at her, eyes shining, hands trembling slightly, and suddenly understood. All the pain, loss, and loneliness I once endured wasn't wasted, because in the place I thought was reduced to rubble, I had planted an entire future. My story isn't just about fighting for a piece of land. It's a journey of reclaiming self-worth in the face of betrayal by my own blood. I've learned that family doesn't have to be bound by genetics. It's the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart. Willow Rise isn't just a reborn farm. It's living proof that resilience, love for the land, and loyalty to your core values can rebuild an entire life, from ruin to hope. What do you think about Samantha's decision? If it were you, would you have the courage to stand against your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more powerful real-life stories about family and the choices we make